bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car. And we decide where it should go and by what route to do. We the people are free. And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited.
Well, good evening, folks. Hope you're chuffing along through your week quite nicely. Daylight savings hasn't affected you too badly, or if it has, at least you're starting to get a bit more used to it. That's what we're all hoping at any rate. I haven't missed any appointments so far with the interstate changeovers, so fingers crossed it continues on that way. It's always nice when you can say that you're nearly through week one. Having said that, though, I'm going to bugger the whole thing right up. I've been promising you for nearly a week now that we're going to sit down and have a chat with Gerard Holland. Now, Gerard's been of note recently because he's had a couple of articles published in the Australian, in the Daily Mail, and he has been able, through his research centre, the Page Research Centre, has been able to find out a great deal about where some of this dark money is coming from that propagates our Greens, our activists, and gives them the ability to fight the big coal businesses of this country. They are slowly destroying us. Now, by all means, please go and check out the Page Research Centre. The email address is page.org.au. And let's welcome the man himself to the Voice of Freedom now, Gerard Holland. Thank you very much for taking your time and joining us today. I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate it.
No, Carl, thanks for having me.
Mate, I was very, well, excited is the wrong word, I guess, but it's been a question in my mind for a long time how the Greens, these people who like to hug trees and don't like to have showers terribly often, manage to fund themselves up against big coal interests in this country and are able to not only put up a good fight, they put up a decimating fight. And I'm finally pleased to be able to see where the money appears to be coming from. Your Page Research Centre has spent a lot of time trying to find that out. Can you just, first of all, outline what the Page Research Centre is all about and how you got into this particular area of focus?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Page Research Centre is essentially a think tank that is focused on better policy outcomes for rural and regional Australia. And we are firmly of the belief that with Australia's regionally integrated economy, that better outcomes for the regions will be better outcomes for all Australians. And chances are, if you grow it, if you dig it up, if you transport it, manufacture it, or if you come to visit it, it comes from the bush. And that's why we're so focused on these issues. The really inciting incident for us to carry out this piece of research was we were invited to make a submission into the Senate's current committee inquiry into mis- and disinformation around energy and climate. Now, this is a Greens-led Senate inquiry with a Labor vice chair, and they really set out to prove a preconceived conclusion that big fossil and dark interests from overseas were fueling and spreading mis- and disinformation around climate change and the transition towards renewable energy. But from some previous work that we had done, and we are quite focused on the energy debate, as energy is the fundamental input into our economy. That, you know, more expensive energy prices means more expensive everything. That actually the biggest sort of lie and mis- and disinformation that seems to be spread at the moment is this idea that renewables are the cheapest form of energy. They're not the cheapest. It's not even close. You know, additional coal units on brownfield sites probably looking at up to 4 times cheaper once you factor in the full system cost. Compared to renewable energy. So where did this lie come from? Who's been spreading this lie, and how has it taken such a hold in our public debate? And when we started to ask those questions, we sort of discovered this network of organisations that are quite climate alarmist in their output, quite radical in their push for the acceleration towards the renewable transition. And they all had something in common. They were deathly against coal, deathly against gas, even as a sort of transition fuel. And nearly all of them came out in opposition to a transition towards nuclear energy, which again doesn't seem to make much sense if you are concerned about CO2 emissions and you are concerned about the land impact and damage to forests and all sorts of things, you would think that nuclear would be the obvious off point from this. And what we discovered was this network is extremely well funded. They brought in over 170 million in financial year 23-24 alone. So this is huge sums of cash. This is more than Labor and the coalition spent combined at the last election.
Wow.
And going through overseas registers, financial statements, annual returns from a whole heap of foundations and philanthropists overseas, none of it declared domestically. It was literally a scattergun to see what we could find. We found this network has been seeded by over $100 million of foreign money that has come in, specifically earmarked to end the use of fossil fuels in Australia and destroy the social license of coal. And this is, as far as we're concerned, the biggest foreign interference operation in Australia's history, dealing with one of the most important pieces of our critical infrastructure. And we have seen electricity prices soar by about 70% in real terms in the last 10 years, which has meant everyone's living standards have gotten worse, and our grid is less reliable, less secure, and more vulnerable than it's been at pretty much any other point in modern industrial Australian history.
Well, I think the current predictions for electricity prices are they're going to go up another 70% before 2030, isn't it?
That was, so we actually conducted some modelling on that in February, and we came to exactly that conclusion. And we did a report that sort of looked at what are the multiple pathways Australia could take, because there's a few different options on the table at the moment. There was the coalition's plan, which was essentially a tech neutral approach, looking to reduce emissions, but including nuclear and all others, coal with carbon capture storage in the mix. The current trajectory that we're on, which is sort of 70 to 85% renewables with battery and gas firming, the kind of teal and green fantasy of a fully renewable grid with no gas, and then the no net zero option, where we said, what if you just went for the cheapest prices possible? How cheap could you make it? And on our current trajectory, you're right, we're heading for another 70% in real terms at least in the next 5 to 10 years. The coalition's pathway, you could look at maybe a minor reduction, a freezing of where prices are, or more likely an increase of up to about 30%, because you're still building a lot more new kit into the grid. But by far the cheapest option, you could see bill reductions 30-40%, was if we just built additional coal units on existing sites with existing transmission lines, and just went for the cheapest possible kit we could.
Or build half a dozen nuclear power stations.
Sure, exactly.
Which would also have ongoing benefits to industry. Much larger industry could draw a lot more power, and who knows, we might start manufacturing again. God, I said that word out loud. Don't just. I'm very sorry. I know that can be very upsetting.
It's all of the above. We are. The transition of human development has been more power. And the worry with Australia and a lot of developed nations at the moment, like the UK and Western Europe, is actually frozen, and our electricity demands haven't really shifted in the last couple of years. The US continues to see increased desire for power because they're doing and making and building more things. And if we want AI, if we want data centers, if we want any of that industry here, let alone making cars and having aluminium smelters, we need a lot more electricity. So it's not just enough to keep what we've got going. We are going to need additional units, and nuclear for the next 80, 100 years makes a whole lot of financial and economic sense to head down that trajectory.
So $100 million coming in from overseas. We've heard names like George Soros and the organizations that he funds. There was talk that he was behind the Teals and the Greens for quite a lot of time. Could we identify some of this money, for instance, where it's coming from? Because I gather a lot of it will be coming from the players who are invested in the manufacture of the windmills or the infrastructure or the power, the transmission lines that have to be put up. That's where this money is coming from, the people who are actually going to be making the money in the back end. Is that right?
So I just stressed the $100 million that we found is not exhaustive. And there is likely far much more money coming in that we haven't found yet. And this is what we would consider dark money. So essentially, organizations like mine and other organizations like Menzies and other think tanks, we're on the transparency register with the AEC, which means that every donation we receive over $15,000 or in July over $1,000, we have to declare that publicly so people can see who our donors are. They know who's contributing to the work that we're doing. But some organizations that are considered third parties and non-political by their nature, they don't have to make these kind of declarations. And so the way this operation works is the international funds come into organisations like the Sunrise Project, which is a charity that has tax deductibility, which is able to receive funds from overseas, but isn't considered political, despite the fact that all of their objects are inherently political in nature. And then this organisation then re-grants this money onto other organisations downstream, be it the Environmental Defenders Office, the Australia Institute, Greenpeace, or for all we know, directly to different politicians' campaigns. Now, this is where it gets hard to trace, is because they don't have to declare it. We don't know what's coming in, and we don't know how they're chopping up those checks and sending them downstream. So what we were able to find is what honest brokers overseas have declared, or because of whatever jurisdiction they're operating in, they have to declare where they're re-granting their money. But some of the big funds, you're looking at the Bulmer Group, you're looking at the Oak Foundation, you're looking at the Sequoia Climate Foundation, and in many ways, these organisations themselves operate as money rinsing foundations, because you give your money to Sequoia anonymously, and then Sequoia then re-grants it, and then by the time it gets downstream to fight some gas project in the Barossa, if that money came from a specific donor overseas, it's passed through so many organisations, it's very, very, very difficult to trace where these funds are coming from. But so we, I'm not saying that he hasn't given. We haven't yet found a link between, say, George Forrest and the Open Democracy Foundation, or Open Society, which I think is the vehicle that he uses. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. But we did find that some of the seed funding to grow this initial movement came from the Rockefeller Foundation, which again is, I think, worth noting for the Australian interest.
One of the big interests Australian companies involved in this rollout of particularly those god-awful wind-powered monstrosities that they're dotting across our landscape is Fortescue. And that's Twiggy Forrest. It used to be Fortescue Mining. They took the mining part out, and he's decided to go very green. But the damage that is being done to the Australian landscape to install this infrastructure, I don't think many people are aware of that. Is that something that you studied as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something that we've published any work on, but I come from a farming background. I was born and raised in the bush, and so it's something I'm acutely aware of just from a community aspect. These are enormously damaging projects with a land footprint that boggles the mind. To give you a bit of an example, if you want to power 100,000 homes for an hour, so again, not a snapshot in time, we're talking about electricity through time, which you have to look at when if you want to compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges, comparing renewables to other sources of generation. To power 100,000 homes for an hour at peak demand, you would need about 2 school buses worth of coal in your coal-fired power plant. You would need about a tennis ball of uranium in your nuclear power station, or you would need about 3,000 AFL fields worth of solar panels. Now, if you wanted to power those 100,000 homes for an additional hour, and say that additional hour was at night time, well, then not only do you need those 3,000 AFL fields of solar panels, you need another 600 AFL fields of solar panels to charge your batteries, and then you need 2 basketball courts worth of Tesla mega batteries for 1 hour, and then those batteries are fully discharged. So if you have a low wind night and you need to power 6 or 7 hours throughout the night, well, the scale starts to just get astronomically unfeasible and unrealistic. So that's the solar story. The wind turbines, of course, they're putting these 100-meter turbines, 150-meter turbines, a scale that you can't imagine, on the top of our beautiful rainforests, on mountaintops. But then you've got access roads of 20, 30 meters wide to get the blades up, to get all the crew, to get all the maintenance and operations up to these mountaintops. So you clear huge swaths of forest. The huge amount of concrete and cement that they need to build their columns usually have literally concrete factories being set up on site to produce it on site. So the destruction that we're doing to our natural environment is just of a level unseen. Now, I'm not saying that an open pit gold mine or a coal mine also doesn't do damage to environment. But there are always trade-offs when you're designing policy, and you have to weigh off, how can I produce the most public benefit? And if you had, say, an AFL field worth of a coal mine, you could power hundreds of thousands, if not millions of homes for decades from that mine. That same landmass with solar panels, you'd be lucky to power a couple of thousand homes on a cloudy day for more than 20 minutes. And this is where we're making this catastrophic trade-off, and the benefit to the public, the benefit to the economy, the benefit to the consumer just does not stack up. And the damage to the environment compared to a dense energy source where we're more efficiently using our land, it doesn't even come into comparison.
It appears to me that the man on the land, the man and woman on the land, have been made to feel guilty for being on the land and are being punished for being on the land, for being the food providers of this nation, amongst other things. That none of this seems to be taken into any consideration. I know making a living off the land is never easy. There are great years, and then there are really, really bad years that tend to outweigh the great years significantly. However, the people that come off the land are made of tough stuff. So why are they resorting? I know in some cases they're not actually agreeing to allow these companies onto their land. They're being forced to allow them on their land, but some are agreeing. Is there any financial benefit to, instead of having 100 heifers in your rolling hills, to have 100 windmills?
So it is, and you get a fairly hefty paycheck. It's money for nothing. You host these installations on your property. You get your 40 or 50 or 100 grand, depending on the size of your property, how much you got on it, that they pay you in rent. And essentially you've drought-proofed your property. It means if you have a bad year or you have an outbreak of thistles or whatever it is, and you haven't gotten on top of it, you're safeguarded against that. The problem is everyone downstream from you that has to host all the transmission lines, they don't get that. They don't get when you're coming into town or some of these rural properties, the access roads again to get in and out, they don't get compensated for that. And then when you decide, you've had your 10, 15 years and either you want to retire or you want to decommission these things, then what happens? And we are so new into this life cycle, and this is one of the things that I really, really worry about, is that, solar panels, wind turbines, 15, 20 year lifespan, if you're lucky and they're maintained really well, right? So we've only started to build these things out about 10 years ago, so we haven't yet come to the end life cycle of some of these projects. I think per wind turbine, I think by law they're required to squirrel away about 80 grand for decommissioning costs. That wouldn't make a dint on it. If you've got 150 metre,
is this the farmer? The farmer is meant to squirrel that away.
Yeah, so the companies squirrel that money away to give to the farmer when the time comes. But other than that, it's up to the farmer's responsibility to get rid of them. They say, here's 80 grand, get rid of the wind turbine. So this is a huge scandal that's waiting to happen. And again, in the next 5 to 10 years, these stories are going to start coming out when these projects start to wind down and they're no longer viable. You can't recycle these things. Well, you can recycle them. It's just so expensive that there's no market or desire to do so. So most of it's going to end up in landfill. We've already seen in the US where they start a little bit earlier than us. You've got these huge, massive, like kilometre-long stretches of just wind turbines that are being buried. Blades because they haven't got anything to do with them, or they'll end up out in the oceans. We'll ship them overseas for some other nation to deal with. It's a huge environmental scandal that just is getting no attention whatsoever because the money in renewables, it's all there. You said at the start of your program, how this industry has been able to push big fossil out of the public debate. I think this is one of the misunderstandings, and I can't speak for overseas in the US, and I'm sure in other jurisdictions there's a lot of money being thrown around. But in Australia, the vast majority of profits come from our export markets, if you're in the fossil game, be that coal or gas or anything else. So the domestic market is such a small slice of the pie that they have very, very little risk appetite to get involved in a domestic argument, to get involved in a domestic campaign. And they're quite happy just to keep selling stuff overseas, as long as it means that the regulators leave them alone, the government leaves them alone. And they're far more inclined to try and work with the powers that be to make sure that they can keep getting approvals, or that they can keep their taxes down, or not have any extra royalties slapped on them, et cetera, et cetera. So actually there isn't a lot of money in the fight for our own domestic energy production. Which part of me wishes maybe there was, because we would have cheaper power prices and we wouldn't have headed so far down this track that we have. All the money in Australia in domestic energy production comes from the renewable lobby. And for a couple of $100 million in activism, they are reaping billions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies under the government's capacity investment scheme. There is no other rort where you can make those kind of returns in any other industry currently. And it is an absolute scandal.
what surprises me is that there aren't Labor and Liberal or Conservative businesses wanting to get in on this, because they all like making money as well. They just have a slightly larger social conscience, and I only mean by very, very few degrees. But we've seen since Labor came into power in this country, our energy prices have gone through the roof, whereas prior to that, under Conservative governments, they were able to maintain a certain stability. And I must say, it's been over 50 years since I had to worry about being in a small country town and wondering whether or not we were going to have rolling power blackouts through summer, because we couldn't turn the air conditioners on, or if everybody did, the whole state would go dark. So I'm old enough to remember that there were those times living in the Wimmera of Victoria, where I grew up, and if you were lucky enough to have an air conditioner, you weren't allowed to turn it on in peak summer because the house would brown out. There just wasn't enough power then. But that's 55 years ago. So we're going back to that.
So I think there's a couple of things at play here. On the corporate side, we are increasingly a rent-seeking economy, in that you've got your geese and you've got your pluckers, and the pluckers are trying to take as many feathers from the geese as they can with as little hissing and screaming as possible. And we're running out of geese. They're actually producing the value because we've got a surplus of pluckers. And
the feather plucker has a son coming up behind him.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And I mean, we're seeing this with the copper smelter bailout that's happening at the moment. Now, I am very much a pro-industrial, pro-manufacturing guy. I was very excited when Andrew Hastie was talking the other day about making cars again. I think it's a disgrace how little manufacturing we conduct in this country at the moment, because we've made it so hostile to business, energy costs, labour costs, taxes, etc., etc. At the same time, it is not sustainable that we become an economy where the government just continues to bail out companies that are struggling because we haven't created the business conditions in which industry can thrive. Because we haven't got the conditions where industry can thrive, everyone is now reliant on the government tea. Whether it's the capacity investment scheme, all these renewable companies that are dependent upon these subsidies. Like this is what people need to realise, there isn't a solar panel on the roof of your house or a battery that you've installed that hasn't been subsidised by the taxpayer. You have not paid the full cost for any of those pieces of kit. We have all cross-subsidised that. And so it's a lot of these big corporates, they're very happy to go along with it because they know it can't be done, and they know that the government will bail them out if things go bad, if things go wrong. You've got some companies like, for example, AGL, and sure, they've got coal-fired power plants, but they're getting the subsidies on the renewable side. But as our power bills go up, and as the wholesale cost of electricity increases, those generators are making more money off that. So if you're AGL and you've got a coal-fired power plant that you're not refurbishing, because you keep saying we're going to wind it down. The government keeps enforcing you to extend it. I imagine there's a few financial sweeteners in there. But then the wholesale price of electricity goes up. That means you're probably making more money off that coal-fired power plant than you would have been if you only had a coal and it was all cheaper. So the person who loses in all this is the consumer. It's the punter at home. At the same time, how we got into this place that 55 years ago we were worried about brownouts, and now we're entering that place now. We are a highly urbanized population. As I understand it, we're one of the most urbanized populations on the planet, and increasingly our voter base and the demographics of this nation are completely removed from the parts of the country that actually produce the value and the wealth. And as I opened up at the start of the show, it's the bush. It's the bush that overwhelmingly, 70-80% of our export value comes from the regions. But our population in the regions is shrinking and shrinking. Their electoral influence and say in where the public heads is shrinking and shrinking. You can have all of the bush, all of rural New South Wales voting for the National Party, but if you've got just a Labor heartland in Sydney, or Labor in Melbourne, or Labor in Brisbane, it makes it very, very difficult for these regional voices to get heard. And this is probably beyond the scope of this conversation, but you start to think, well, do we need to have another look at federation and see how we're distributing the balance of power, how are we distributing decision-making so that regional people do have more of a say over their own affairs, and whether it's new states or whether it's abolishing the states and just having a federal, or I'm getting a bit silly here, but
well, we were talking last night.
It's unsustainable, the trajectory that we're on.
we were talking last night that this mass immigration push by the current government isn't just to be nice and let a whole heap of people in and get them qualified so they can go home again. This is actually re-engineering the voting demographic of the nation. It's re-engineering the nation's demographic, not just the voting demographic. And as you've rightly identified, most of those people coming off the planes, over 1,100 a day these days, are not going to the regions. They're not coming out into the country. They're not buying farms and setting up, starting to produce things. They're not even going into little towns and setting up in butchers, bakers and candlestick makers. They're going straight into the cities and straight onto the government tit in most cases. What can the country regions offer these new folks to the country? What can they offer to drag these folks out of the metropolitan areas and give them meaningful positions in life in the bush? Because it is a great, absolutely wonderful place to bring up your kids living in the bush. I mean, I feel sorry for kids that grew up in the city and they sort of look at you and say, oh, you know, hayseed, you grew up out there in the wheat farms. Well, yeah. But I got to learn how to play with eastern brown snakes and copperheads and all sorts of great things that you city folks shit yourselves over. So that's just one of the benefits in my case. But, what can we do to excite our new arrivals to move into the bush and maybe get a real understanding of what true Australia is and just how important their vote is?
So that I think is one of the most important questions that we should be asking as a nation at the moment. And there's probably three different thoughts I have about that on the political side, the economic side, and then the cultural side. On the political side, I do think we need to have a serious conversation around new states and whether it's a combined Riverina, New England, and New South Wales, whether it's a independent Capricornia or North Queensland up north. But the power
you've just made a lot of friends in Catalan.
No, totally. But the power that Brisbane has over that region and the power that Sydney has over the Riverina and New England, completely disconnected from the effects of what they're doing, it is completely out of kilter. And as far as the feasibility of it, I mean, if you look at a state like Tasmania that has all their senators, that has a couple of MPs, has far more political say, and they're a population of 500 to 1 million people. You've got a couple of million in North Queensland alone. So if you're looking at wealth, GDP per capita, potential exports, again, North Queensland is a far more lucrative market than Tasmania is. So I think that should be the start of the conversation of how can we give more autonomy to the regions in order to control their own futures. I think that also could fix some of our productivity woes as well, because we don't have competitive federation or competitive taxation in this country. We don't have states competing with each other to offer more incentives, to lower taxes, to we're going to wipe stamp duty to incentivize one business to come here like they do in the US. Like in the US, California is competing with Texas, who's competing with Florida, who's competing with Utah, who's competing with Nevada. We just don't have that. We have Sydney competing with Melbourne and competing with Brisbane. And so I think that would provide the opportunity for a more competitive federation, which would ease some of our productivity and actually give some of these places a real engine for success. So that's the political side. As far as how we actually get people to come to these places, at the end of the day, we want young people to move and have kids. That's how you begin to grow a population, and a lot of that needs to be jobs there, and part of that's a perception problem as well. The social prestige in this nation is a university education and going to work in the city for some accountancy firm or Deloitte or a marketing firm, whatever it is.
I thought you became an influencer these days after going to university.
Or become an influencer, exactly. We don't have the same kind of social prestige around setting up a small business in the bush. Never mind the fact that you'll probably have a lot more disposable income, a much bigger house, and much greater living standards. And so I think part of that is just telling that story and rejigging. Part of it, I think, actually, is I'm not convinced we need to have a big Australia or that is good for us. We are witnessing an AI revolution, and for decades the big fear has been that automation and mechanisation would mean that labourers wouldn't be able to find any work. Turns out it's much easier to replace a software program than it is to replace a bloke on the tools, and it's all these university and white collar jobs that are going to go by the wayside. We sort of have a model of that already. And it was actually the bush where this started. You have farmers who used to employ 20, 30 people to manage 2,000 acres. Now all of that can be done with one bloke, tractor, an air seeder, an auto steer. And actually what that's meant is farmers have become just astronomically more productive than we've ever been with a much smaller population. And actually that could be the model for all the country, that if we embrace some of these new and burgeoning technologies, we don't need to put all the burden on our public infrastructure and public services. We don't need to be bringing in people that don't yet have an understanding of our values, of our culture, of our traditions, what makes Australia different to other nations. We could actually just be increasing our own productivity per person and embracing technology. And what the farmers have done, I think we should be scaling across the bush and making everyone in the bush more productive. But also that model could work in the cities as well. And I think there's a labour reprioritisation there as well. Again, we need to bring back the social prestige to working with your hands and care work. I think, looking after people at the beginning or end of life should be some of the work we value most. It seems to be the work that we are most comfortable bringing in low-skilled migration overseas to fill. I think that is an absolute travesty. And so I think all of these are kind of social. But also we just need to tell people how livable the bush is. We need pubs, we need bars, we need restaurants. Give people things to do, give them a good life, and they'll want to turn up. And part of that is narrative, part of that is probably a little bit of investment. But I think the solution to a lot of our problems is actually reopening the frontier, investing in our regions, and we'll see a rebalancing of our population, a rebalancing of our political priorities, and hopefully a demography as a nation that has a little bit more perspective around how wealth is produced and created and what makes a country worth living.
And manufacturing is going to have to start somewhere, isn't it? So land is a bit cheaper. I'm not going to say it's cheap, but it's a bit cheaper in the bush than it is trying to set up in the city. And plenty of companies have already gone to small towns, invested in putting in the infrastructure for their particular business, and 10 years down the track, they are flourishing. They are not just state, but they are industry leaders. And I'm thinking here the likes of abattoirs and milk businesses, that kind of thing. Now, I understand there's a lot of overseas investment in those particular areas too, but Australians, I think, are just about ready now to start investing back in Australia. Now, I think there was some kind of a bond plan many years ago that you could invest in Australia, you could put your hard-earned into, and in return you'd receive this bit of paper that said, at some point down the track, we're going to return this investment to you with a bit of interest. Thanks very much for the loan of your money. Are we at that point again where Australians need to put their hands in their pockets and genuinely, for some sort of manufacturing or infrastructure building projects, and then of course we'd have to make sure we had the right people to manage it?
So I would just love to have this conversation around what's the best way to get Australia open for business again. We've become a nation that digs holes and buys houses. And increasingly, we're making it hard to dig holes, and increasingly fewer and fewer people can buy the houses. I think I was reading the other day that the value of our housing stock is like 4 to 7 times our GDP as a country. Like, it's just completely unsustainable. And a big part of that is the house becomes most people's primary investment vehicle. And why wouldn't you? It's a triple earner. It's you get a tax deduction through negative gearing. You can potentially bring in some rental income if you rent it out, but it's also going to increasingly appreciate in value because no government wants to be the one that house prices come down. And because that's where most people's savings is, it means that ordinary mums and dads have literally done what they've been told, who have done what they thought was savvy and intelligent financial advice, and all of that comes unstuck. This is a huge problem, but it means that all of this productive capital that could be, exactly as you said, going in towards infrastructure, that could be going into developing and growing businesses, that could be into the productive parts of the economy, are being tied up in one of the least productive areas you can possibly imagine. I don't believe we have a housing crisis. We have a land crisis, in that people are banking land. Sure, the building code is ridiculous and we could be building more houses, but if you're able to get the cost of a house down from 450 grand to build to 400 grand, you still got another 1.6 million in the land value that can only be attacked if you're starting to think in a different way. Now, it's hard if you're already on the merry-go-round, and that is where 95% of your asset, that's your retirement, that's your savings, it's the little castle that you built up over 30 or 40 years. How do you get off that? But what is clear is that it's completely unsustainable for the future prosperity of this nation that we have such unproductive capital tied up in an unproductive asset. And you're right, I would love to see governments to start to think, well, how could we peel people's money away from their house and put it into other investments? And it's another thing that we don't really talk about much of a nation is risk. Risk is fundamentally important for development, growth, and prosperity, because risk says, okay, I'm going to lay down money, and if it goes wrong, I go bust. But if it goes well, that means that I can generate multiples of what I've laid down. And increasingly, as the public sector becomes one of the biggest employers, I think 50% of Australians are directly employed by the public sector, another 70% indirectly. That is 70% of people have completely de-risked their lives, which means they aren't making those gambles that make those breakthroughs that produce wealth and prosperity that scales of a magnitude. And this, again, is a very, very big worry for us as a nation, is if we aren't taking risks and we aren't incentivized to take risks, if our best and brightest coming through are thinking, I'd rather be a lawyer with Home Affairs Department than start a business or a tech startup or whatever it is, that means that we are not creating the kind of economic conditions that produce wealth and prosperity that lifts all boats. And so we need to bring back risk, which probably means we need to add risk to some of the safer parts of the economy. And we do need to start thinking through, well, how are we using our wealth as a nation? Is it going to the productive parts? Is it going to manufacturing? Is it going to the things that actually build the nation that we live in? Or is it going into house prices that are sitting there making 7-8% returns year on year, but not actually providing anything of value to anyone else in the community?
I'd love to sit down and have a talk with you about potential ways that immigration in this country could be used to actually help build the nation, which is ultimately what we want. There are two projects that immediately spring to my mind that we could put people to work on straight away and would have a large impact. Is it the Bradfield project, the bringing the water down from far north Queensland and waterproofing Australia, basically? That would allow us to become the food bowl for the world. There'd be practically nothing we couldn't grow. We'd have enough land everywhere that could be used to grow food on. And the other one is the fast train project across the nation. Now, we're obviously very good at importing people from countries who are very good at hard work. How about we import some German engineers or some Japanese engineers, or these folks who know how to build these very fast trains? Is that the kind of infrastructure the country needs?
Oh, look, building anything. I shouldn't say that because actually, what makes your capital go well is not the fact that you're spending it; it's the value that you're producing off the back end. So I shouldn't say building anything. But I think you're exactly right. There's a really interesting, and whether it's migration or whether it's just rethinking our entire education system and the way that we're geared as a nation. A stat that always blows my mind is that in the 50s, Ghana and South Korea were more or less directly comparable. Similar GDP, similar levels of poverty, similar education rates, similar kind of manufacturing and economic output. These are both very, very poor agrarian societies, who've been recently marked by civil conflict. Now, fast forward to today, and obviously South Korea is one of the most influential, impactful economies in the world, and Ghana, God bless them, haven't really gone on that same pathway of development.
Stepped up, no.
But what that says to me is that actually a sense of civilizational purpose and direction and intentionality around the way that you grow your labour force, you can have an enormous impact on the future prosperity of your nation. So you're exactly right. Why aren't we looking at if our elites have decided, or those with the cash in the game have decided, we can't make simple manufacturing anymore. We just can't compete with Chinese sweatshops in India and Vietnam and all the rest. Why don't we try and compete with the Germans or the South Koreans or the Japanese and start looking at high level and niche and manufacturing? Yep. Why don't we actually look at where can we provide value? And again, if we look at our education system, it's for decades now, it's been get everyone into higher education. Well, that's not where the jobs are going to be anymore. And that 30 or 40% of people, oftentimes young men, who went and did an arts degree or a media degree or whatever it is, that probably should have gotten a trade or done a skill or become an engineer or whatever it is. It's those people that can begin to fill these labour gaps. And actually, these jobs pay really well.
Yeah.
If you want to buy a house and drive a big ute and have 4 kids and go on the weekly holiday, don't go to university. Become a builder. Become a brickie.
Yeah. Learn how to
Become
make
a plumber.
umbrellas and sunshades.
Yeah,
Because
totally. Yeah.
if you listen to the climate criers, we're going to burn to a crisp. Umbrellas and sunshades. Big business in it, I tell you.
Yeah, pool floaties.
Pool floaties too. Exactly right. Mate, thank you for spending some time with us today. I would like to be able to call on you again in the future and discuss more of these sort of bigger picture items. And I can't commend people highly enough to page.org.au, the Page Research Centre, and some of the articles you and your team are putting together. Do you want to give us a bit of a tease of something you've got coming up that you'll be releasing shortly?
Yeah, sure. So we've got a couple of different pieces. So on the foreign influence story, there is still a lot more left to uncover. And to give a bit of a teaser, we're just crossing our T's and dotting our I's at the moment. But it looks like a foreign actor with a significant interest in a fossil fuel industry that has directly benefited from our transitioning away from coal-fired power generation in Australia has set up organisations that have been working with the CSIRO and AEMO in setting Australia's renewable energy targets. So I think that is really important for the public interest for people to know that this is happening, and we'll have more to say on that. We're also so our big 3, I would say, of the issues that we focus on is energy and energy policy, defence and security, but particularly the security side of that: supply chains, fuel security, food security. Less the guns and bullets and more how do we keep our nation operating in a time of turmoil.
Yep.
And we're doing some supply chain mapping, and we'll have more to say in that space as well.
Have you got refineries in your planning for that? Because
yeah, absolutely. And again, when people think refineries, yes, liquid fuel, but it's also everything downstream from that. Once we lose our refineries, you lose our plastics manufacturing, we lose our ability to make medical supplies. It's people don't realise how important liquid gold is. Oil and gas. There is a reason why it is so highly sought after, and despite all the taxes and levies and everything we slap on it, we need more and more and more of it. It's because this is really, really useful stuff that our modern world is built on. And as we become an import nation rather than a domestic refinery nation, it just creates so many problems, Carl. But so we'll have some more work on that coming up as well. And the third one is just looking at our culture, demographics, family policy, education policy, and we recently did some pieces on education and some suggestions of why rates might be failing, and we'll have more to say in that space as well. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled. We've got a lot more work that we've got working on, and we're keen to get it out.
On current figures, the education policy seems to be keep your kids at home and educate them there. Homeschooling has gone through the roof.
Yeah. We mentioned that in our report. I think kids going through school now are about a year behind where they were 20 years ago. So we've had record amounts of funding into the education system, and our kids are going backwards. So something's gone terribly wrong, Carl. Terribly wrong.
Gerard Holland from the Page Research Centre, thank you very much for spending a bit of time with us on the Voice of Freedom. I look forward to doing it again sometime soon.
Mate, thanks for having me. We'd love to be back on if you'll have me again.
I just thought I'd share that one with you folks. I particularly like, hang on, I'll put my picture up so you can actually see me. There you go. I like that. I've been meaning to play that kangaroo clip for a little while. Thank you to Gerard. We had to catch up early this morning. He's got a young child, so catching up at night is too difficult. Given the family schedule that they've got. So I recorded that this morning, but I found it a very, very interesting chat. And clearly a lot of you did too, found Gerard to be a very interesting and very well-informed and educated young man. So if you haven't already been and had a look, the Page Research Centre is at page.org.au. And you can have a look through just some of the articles that they've already got up there. There are quite a few of them. Doing well. Stu, you're on fire tonight in the chat, aren't you, mate? I don't know. You and your dog. Let's just be glad to say that the dog isn't Navy as well. We'll be all happy about that. There have been so many great comments in there tonight, and I think I'd like to thank Paul, who pointed out that the price of silver went to $76.16, I think it was, or something overnight. And thank you, Paul, for sending me that at the time that it went to $76.09 or whatever it was. I think that was at 3:32 this morning. If my eyes look red, it's because I haven't been back to bed since that message came through. Not because I got really excited and had to get out and, be part of it all. It's just that I woke up then and couldn't go back to sleep. So I'm going to bed very shortly after we say goodnight tonight, I can tell you. But yes, pretty exciting news on the precious metals front. Silver still rocketing away quite nicely, 6,440.05 in Australian dollars, and $74.89 at the moment on the Ainsley silver spot price. Perth Mint's another good one to go and check out if you're looking for spot prices too. I think it updates every 15 minutes or so. Ainsley's, well, it seems to update every time I hit refresh, but I know it updates probably every 15 to 30 seconds during the day when they're working. So those prices are usually pretty much spot on. And there is so much talk that if we break through what for us will be a significant point of about 78 78 Australian, I think it will be. We've already busted through the American $50 mark, and really the sky's the limit when it comes to where gold's going to go if it busts or keeps busting through as it is. There is no ladder to success here because it's never done. Gold and silver have never done this before. So it's all uncharted ground. Now, I caution that this could all stop. It could all go backwards. It could take a backward step very quickly. How much of a backward step? Well, look, I don't think it's going to go back to $32 for an ounce of silver. Put it that way. I don't think gold's going to go back down to, $1,500 an ounce. I don't think that's going to happen. I do think it probably will settle down a little bit in the near future before getting another kick along, probably before Christmas, I would say. And in part, what they're saying before Christmas, if that kick along happens, it will mean that any pause in the market at the moment will be brief, and then the rises will be sharp and significant because they're predicting $100 an ounce for silver before Christmas. Whereas a week ago, they were saying, it's still 2 years away. But they're saying it is not beyond the realms of possibility, and it is not talking up the market in any way to suggest that this is a possibility of $100 an ounce before Christmas. So if you haven't already got some and you're looking at the price now and you're thinking, $75 an ounce, that's a lot of money. You were probably looking at it back when it was $32 an ounce and thinking the same thing. Well, silver has gone up over 60%. Gold's gone up over 50% just this year. And it's showing, neither of them are showing signs of slowing down. So even if you get in now at $75 an ounce, let's say for some silver, if it goes to $100 an ounce before Christmas, that's a pretty considerable profit that you've made per ounce. Is your bank going to be able to do that for you? Better still, if you've got a self-managed super fund or you'd like one, you can probably get a bit more money out of your big super, put it into self-managed super fund and into precious metals, where you can really make some money, much more than you're going to get out of a super fund. So, yeah, go and check that out. Put it in chat. I gather you're talking about the address for Gerard. So, yes, I can. Oh, well, it's actually in the description, so don't worry about that. I won't bother putting it in the chat. It's in the description of the video. You can go and check it out for Gerard's business, which is Page Research Centre, page.org.au. Very simple to remember and easy to check out. Just seeing if you've got a few more other questions or anything there. Hippie. Thank you, Hippie, for whatever you've done. A shout out for Hippie, please, Carl. He supplied all the meat again for the Forest of the Fallen in Twickenham Lakes, or Twitcham Lakes. No, I'm sure it's Twickenham Lakes. Feathers, fur, and fins. Always got you covered. Feathers, fur, and fins. Melbourne joint. Thank you, Hippie. Thank you for helping out. Of course, Forest of the Fallen happening all around the country. And if you do happen to see one, folks, pull up and just take a walk through. Shake the hands of those people who put it out. That's a massive effort that they do. Most weekends they get out and do that sort of stuff. So truly, truly wonderful. And it's great that there are businesses like hippies that'll get out and pitch in too. So that's awesome. Stu's up for adoption, but he comes with a price. It could be your mental health. Just saying. Might be Stu's, but it might be yours. Sorry, Stu, that's probably a bit unfair. What about the copper? Well, look, if you own a copper mine or you can get shares in one, I would. Copper's very interesting and very wealth driven at the moment. Prices are going through the roof from what I hear. But if you want a copper wire stripping machine, I think you're looking at a starting price of about $1.2 million. That takes away a bit of the fun. Silver goes up, electronic manufacturing goes up. Very true. That's part of the demand that's being placed on particularly silver. And one of the reasons that we query why it's so cheap, because the demand for silver is everywhere, particularly in electronic manufacturing. I also found out, and I think I mentioned this in the show a couple of weeks ago, that there are 500 ounces of silver in every missile in the US fleet of missiles, or in the US Armory. 500 ounces of silver in every missile. Not in all of them collectively, but in each one that gets blown to smithereens whenever these things get launched. However, up until recently, they haven't had a country to launch them at. Thankfully, Ukraine offered themselves up to be available to test fire some of these weapons, and they've done so quite successfully. But now you get a bit of an understanding of why every shot costs millions and millions of dollars. If there's 500 ounces of silver in the head of every weapon, every missile that's being either fired from the ground, the air, or a ship, then that adds up pretty quick. On top of that, there is all the solar silver that is required. And solar silver is what we're calling the silver that's required for China to fulfill its projected quotas of solar panel building. Now, bear in mind that the Chinese want to make China completely solar dependent and have got huge swathes of land that they're planning to cover in these solar fields. So that's a huge amount of demand. Where is that being reflected in the price of silver? Well, it's not, because somehow through the COMEX market, it's being suppressed. Losses in other parts of the market are being hidden in the COMEX market against the price of silver, which keeps it low. So, nasty. When it really does go, there is a lot of pressure being put on people now. Central banks, banks everywhere, they've got to have gold to back up their own finances. And they have got a lot of debt that has been buried in the COMEX market, in the silver market particularly. They're trying to buy that debt back, but to do so, they need precious metals, which are now, as you can see, on the upward trajectory of price. So every day they go back and buy more, it's more expensive than it was the day before. So it's costing them a lot of money to get out of debt. So watch this space. I think we're going to see a lot more of it in the near future. I want to talk quickly about the 10 days of darkness, because we haven't spoken about that in quite a while. Could this shutdown that America is currently experiencing be, in theory, the 10 days of darkness? I think we're coming up on day 9 now for the Americans. It's the 9th here. So, yeah, that'll be day 9. I think it started on October the 1st. So another day tomorrow, day 10. Will they come out with some sort of a settlement, an agreement? I don't think so. If you look at what's going on in some of those Senate hearings at the moment, or congressional hearings at the moment in the US, Pam Bondi has been grilled for the last couple of days by a couple of Senate committees. She has held herself up very, very well to a very biased hounding by the usual Democrats holding positions of power in the Congress. She's sat them in their place and, in fact, has let, I think inadvertently or deliberately inadvertently, has let slip information that indicates more than one of the Democrats that have been asking supposedly hard or curly questions of her in recent days is currently or has previously been under investigation by her Justice Department and the FBI for various different forms of nefariousness. And some of that nefariousness involves the significant others of these Congress people, men and women, of the Democratic side. So more to come up. Now, if this is the 10 days of darkness, and on Friday or Friday evening before midnight, there is some sort of settlement reached, what next? Well, by the look of it, Israel and America are going to attack Iran. It will be biblical. I think Trump has quoted as much. In fact, he has pointed at the biblical references for such a battle. And if he hasn't, somebody else has, and they are certainly out there for you to check. It should be very, very concerning for people. However, those people who are concerned could take heart by, at least from what I'm seeing, the huge amount of truth coming out now about the Zion movement and how Zionists are very different to what you would call normal Jews. For those folks who don't understand the differences, and I'm going to put this in really, really basic terms, there is Judaism and there is Zionism. Zionism is the pursuit of a set of goals through political means. So they are the political activists, if you like, of a certain sect that have passed themselves off as Jewish for the last couple of thousand years, but are in fact nothing like it. And in fact, there are a huge amount of historical, I was going to say videos, but a lot of them are still pictures that have been animated through, AI to make them more appealing in this day and age, I think. But I have checked I've checked more than 3 or 4. I've checked quite a lot of these things that pop up, and there is reality behind them. So the battle is being waged, both good and evil, on all forms of social media, probably more so than it is being waged in any open way in mainstream media. I could have that completely wrong. I don't remember the last time I watched mainstream media. No, I didn't watch any of the Dead Pig grand finals. I lost interest in watching a bit of inflated dead pig being kicked around a paddock many, many years ago, but I don't blame people for it. Oh, somebody's just picked up on the Zionist thing. Yeah, well, look, there is a lot of new information to people who hitherto in Australia have not been aware of Zionism and wouldn't be able to tell the difference between one form of Judaism and another. And that's because we luckily have been quite isolated down here in Australia, and those, I speak from experience in Melbourne for the Hasidic Jewish community, that you only ever see really on a Saturday. when they're going to synagogue or spending the day doing what they do with their families. And if you're walking around certain areas in Melbourne, Caulfield being probably one of the main ones, Balaclava, that sort of area, Brighton, all very nice areas, can I tell you, then you'll see a number of Hasidic Jews and their families wandering around enjoying their Sabbath. It's what they have been praying for in some cases that is a bit worrying. And that really then depends on whether or not we are looking at a Zionist or a Jew. A Zionist is someone who will come out and say some of truly the most horrendous things. Now, I'm just going to see if I have a video. I think I needed to edit it before I played it. And so I probably haven't put it in. But some of you will have seen a video that has been circulated after Rosh Hashanah, which was just over the last weekend or so. There was a Jewish rabbi, a female rabbi, telling her audience that human sacrifice has always been part of the human existence. We've just called it different names. And that human sacrifice is a necessary thing. The tears that mothers and fathers shed when their babies die and yada, yada, yada. It's a necessary thing because that's what their book teaches them. That book is the Talmud. I'll cut that video down. I do have it. I can put my hands on it now, but it does need a little bit of editing because I've ripped it from somewhere else. So it's all out of size. I'll have that one for you tomorrow night. I think we'll play that. It's quite shocking to hear her words, and this is not an AI generation. It's already been picked up by a couple of other particularly big alt media channels in the US. So fairly horrific sort of suggestions. It is, yeah, the excuses. Well, it's not even an excuse that she delivers. It's a belief. And if you ever doubted that we are Goyim and what that really truly means to them, this should leave you in no doubt. The good Rabbi Finkelstein has made another appearance. I think I shared that on my Facebook page. So if you scroll that back down, you'll be able to hear his full interview where he happily admits how the Jewish nation, and this would be the Zionist nation, has been working for years to feed our own children back to us in our meats, in our sausage, all this wonderful stuff through our hamburger mince. And that's why, and I haven't lost any weight, but that's why I haven't eaten McDonald's in years or any of that stuff. So hopefully you are the same. Because when I read that, when I first found out about that, something happened inside me. You know, like when you are suddenly hit with a terrible truth, like you're informed somebody close to you has passed away, and that stone in the gut feeling where you know that it's true, you don't want to admit that it's true, you'll think of 100 reasons to make excuses of how it can't be true, but it is true, and you have to accept that. Well, that's what I felt like when I found out about what goes into McDonald's meat. It just hit me right in the pit of my rather large stomach and left me thinking, absolutely true. You know, and from that time on, pretty much, it's I've been able to touch and feel that sort of crap from a distance. So yeah. Free AI checker. Oh yeah, Guru's been flashing it around, has he? Yes, there is a free AI checker. Most of the AI stuff that I see, I don't need to run through a checker. It is a pretty easy thing to spot if you know what you're looking for, and I guess I know what I'm looking for because I've been looking for it for years in how you make this stuff and been making this stuff. So I can see, and particularly here with the voiceovers, although they are getting much better, an AI creation very quickly. In fact, the Commonwealth custodians have just put out an AI generated voiceover to one of their lessons about how to remove yourself from the system. And it's sad that they've used an AI voice, but it is what it is. And if you want to learn how to remove yourself from that system, I think I posted that up on my Facebook page too. So if it's not there, it'll be on InstaTwerp or Twittergram or either one of those things. Oh, and hello to Twitter again tonight. Or what do you call yourselves these days? X, our second show live on X. I can't tell who's who from which room and where in the chat. That led to some confusion last night. So I think there were a couple of Craigs, one, or maybe I just got a name confused at some stage when I was having a bit of a dig at some of the trolls. And there is somebody who watches this show very regularly and is a bit of a supporter of mine, and I can't thank him enough, whose name happens to be Craig. And I think he thought I was having a go at him. I'm sorry, mate. Not the case. Not the case. So last night was my first time on X, and I was quite surprised. Although I shouldn't have been with the content that we had on our chat with Beck Freedom. There was bound to be a few twerps that came in and wanted to cause a bit of dissension in the ranks. But I shouldn't have shut my mouth off, and I should have made sure, Craig, that I knew who the hell I was talking about. So I apologise, mate. That's not my intention to upset the good folks who choose to share a little bit of time with me, either every day or every other day or once a week or however long it is for you. There were a couple of other things I was going to talk about tonight, but I've run over time already, and those things really do stem from the chat that I've just had with Gerard. I thought Gerard was really good. Please let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear more from Gerard. I think he's the kind of bloke we could have something out of at least once a month, and find ourselves greatly informed. And it's good to see, and I would like to do more with his group to help promote the bush and what's going on out there. Good on you, Misha. Geez, you're keen watching old Rumble things. Watching Guru and Kaz discussing Parliament lawn happenings. That must have been exciting. Were there any predictions, and have any of them come true in the last 3 years? That would be my question. Yeah, let's get him on again next month. I reckon we'll absolutely do that. Speaking of people we haven't had on for a while, I think a couple of weeks ago I noticed in the chat somebody said they wanted to catch up with Bob, and we needed to get Bob on again. I'm very keen to get Bob on. Bob has been pretty busy in his own world and in his own personal life. So getting Bob to line up, because he's in a different part of the world to me, time zones are sometimes difficult to line up. And when I did think we might get a good chance last week to catch up, I reached out to him, and he informed me that his father had passed away the day beforehand. And so it'd be a few weeks before he'd be able to come on the show and give us a bit of a hand. So for those folks who are wondering about Bob, yes, Bob is still about, but prayers for Bob and his family on the loss of his dad recently. So very sad. If you could, folks, we would love to wrap up this lottery and give one of you $750 and give somebody else a whole, very, very professionally produced, in this very beautiful blue packet of rounds. This is the Voice of Freedom Byron Bob pack. They are 1/10 of an ounce rounds, and they come in this little 3D printed magnificent thing that our Vince has built, and Silver Fox has done some, but I've run out of yours, mate. I'm not sure if you're printing me anymore or not, but let me know. Very keen to get some if you have. If you would like one of these, folks, we would be very keen and very happy for you to have them. They're a great Christmas gift, and a number of you have bought them for just that very purpose. So we can fulfill a few more immediately. I think I have 6 of Vince's latest versions now. So if you are interested, then please let us know. Carl@vofhq.com. I'll give you a bank account you can pay into, and I will send them pretty much the same day to you. It's a beautiful, very, very nice little pack. I can't believe how well it's come up, and can't thank Vince enough for all the time, effort, and work that he put into designing it. And of course, printing these things takes, well, on his machine takes about 5 hours. I think it's half that time, I think, on Silver Foxes. And Pete from Pinaroo and his young bloke, they've fired up their new 3D printer. And can I tell you, boy, there's some ideas coming out of that little room. We will see something from them in the near future. But I can tell you, in the middle future, Pete was telling me that he has some plans to produce something pretty spectacular out of, now I'm going to get the name wrong, but there is a certain kind of metal, a tin, a zinc, gold, or something like that, which jewelers use. And Pete from Pinaroo, aside from being pretty good at growing garlic and looking after cows and, you know, being a farmer and a pyrotechnician and this and that, and anyway, he has a bit of experience in this area as well. So we can expect a jewelry grade something, I'm not going to tell you what, to come out in the next couple of months. No time. They're just working on the prototypes at the moment, but I'm very excited to tell you that there will be a different kind of thing coming your way in the near future, as opposed to one of these. There'll be something else. It'll be very cool. All right. Loving your work, folks. Have yourselves a bloody good evening. Thank you, Luke. I think you're talking about me speaking gibberish. That's probably the case. I've been awake since 3:30 this morning. And it's been one of those days. I've been running around doing shit today, and put my awning up for the first time in a while today. And I discovered that the wind is still a bit windy. So now the awning's back down again. Exciting day for me, I know. I also managed to catch up with Mike. G'day, Mike. What a marvellous man he is. Mike's come in from, well out west, but he's got a motorhome. He travels around the country, and he wanted to catch up and buy some LifeWave patches off me. So we had a cup of coffee this morning, and it was pretty nice to catch up in the main street of Canungra. And I hope you enjoyed the chat. I know I did, mate, and I'll catch up with you next week with your patches. He's gone off to Brisbane to help a friend who's going through a bit of surgery in the near future. So he's going to be a great friend and go and look after his mate during recovery. So good on you, mate. Thank you for helping when and where you can, and that's no small effort what you're doing. So thank you very much. Also, folks, crunch. Yes, that'll be something else we can talk about probably on another night when I can keep my eyes open, and I'll have a little bit more information available on that. But you're quite right. The way that abortion is being pushed on our children these days, and through some of the reports that have been given to our Senate estimates, to the American Congress and their investigations, it's just an horrendous practice. In fact, I remember there was an Australian nurse who said that it was common practice to leave the fetuses on a tray in another room, just wait for them to die if they were still alive when they were born. And one of them stayed alive for 5 hours. It's just horrendous. What are we raising money for, Luke? Well, we raise money for helps out the Voice of Freedom. We pay our phone bill and internet bill, and what else did we have to pay last month? We had to pay our company registration, which I don't know that was a great deal of money, but it's something that keeps us out of trouble. And, well, things that the company needs. And then we also try and give as much as we can to the Good Samaritan Donkey Sanctuary, Sandy and her crew. I notice Sandy's not in the chat tonight, but because of daylight savings makes life a bit hard. Sandy's probably asleep by the time I start the show. But yeah, the Good Samaritan Donkey Sanctuary, they have over 100 donkeys in care at the moment. Those donkeys are abused or abandoned or just neglected and have been taken in by different care or state organisations. Sometimes they've been taken in by the RSPCA, who hand off the animals to the likes of Sandy and Baz at the Good Samaritan Donkey Sanctuary and keep any money that may have been donated for the care of those donkeys for themselves. So, yeah, people like Sandy and Baz are just golden people as far as I'm concerned, people who go out of their way to look after animals. And I would do everything and more for them. They are just beautiful, beautiful people. And that's why we started the lottery, in part, yes, to help pay some Voice of Freedom bills, because I don't make anything, I don't earn anything, I don't take any money from any government. I simply live on your donations, and if there are none, then I don't do much that week, that month, or whatever. However, if we want to keep the show on the air, then just a phone bill and my internet bills for the month are $364. And if you would like to help chip in without buying a lottery ticket, mate, there's a donate button at vofhq.com. You can just hit there and put $2 in there or $5 or whatever you can afford would be gratefully received. If you choose not to, that's okay too. I have been asked, in fact, I was only asked as recently as the day before yesterday, if I would consider stopping doing a nightly show here on these channels and doing a Patreon show maybe 3 times a week. And I was sort of wondering why I was being asked that question. And it was because, you'll make more money. People will pay Patreon, for you to go and do your show, and you've got a great audience. You've got a lot of people that watch it. So, get them. They'll come and pay to watch every show. Well, Luke, I have said right from the time I started doing this that I refuse to go behind a paywall because I'm one of the people that can't afford to go and pay to get behind a paywall to hear the information. I believe the information should be free. If I've got it, you should have it. And you should have it for the same cost. I guess it does cost me. It costs me internet connection. It costs me time. You don't get to read as much, listen to as much, see as much, hear as much, talk to as many people as I do and still hold down a regular day job. Like I said, I got out of bed this morning at 3:45. I started listening to and watching live stuff out of the States then. I worked through until 9 o'clock doing that, and then did the interview that you saw tonight with Gerard from 9 till 10. Then had to go and meet Mike, caught up with him, then had to be back here on the property to organise some water to go into a tank and navigate a truck down through the property. Then I had to go and look after a few things on the property. Then I had to put together a few other bits and pieces for this show. And then obviously I had to put it out. I haven't eaten all day. I have had 2 cups of coffee, which wasn't really bad. I tell a lie. I did have breakfast. But that's all I've eaten today. And I don't think I'm going to fade away. Don't need any sympathy. That's just how it's been. So I'm sorry. Yes, I do a lot. I don't get paid for any of it. And I guess I live or die on the quality of what you good folk think we're doing here. And I hope you get some benefit out of it. I know you get some benefit out of it because you send me emails and you pull me up in the street. And when I'm on the road in the bus, we talk about it. And I'm blown away, constantly blown away by the people who come and tell me the varied reasons of why I make a difference in their life. And I'm honoured, beyond honoured to be in this position. So thank you for that. And if I do give you some help, if it's the sound of my voice, a calm voice when all around them are screaming, then great. That's what I want my voice to be, because my voice can be your voice. It's that simple. That's what this place was always set up for. For those folks who might be a bit shy about using their voice, let me be that voice for you. All you got to do is contact me, carl@vofhq.com. If you want one of these, let me know. I'll send you the appropriate details. They're $130. Well, Vince hasn't told me not yet, so there's still $130 plus $14 postage. And like I say, I can do 6 or 7 of them straight away. If you are interested, and that'll just about see me out of my stock of Byron bulbs too, just between you, me, and the gatepost. Tomorrow night, one of the things that I want to talk about will be what to do with these new Australians coming to our land. People seem to be up in arms about mass immigration, and I agree. The way it's being done currently is awful. But what other ways could we approach this? What other ways could similar objectives be met, but better outcomes for the nation be had? This is an idea that I have had 20 years ago. In fact, now that I think about it, probably 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. And I threw it around at the time. I had somebody in my life who turned out to be a thieving arsehole of an accountant. But, sorry, did I say that out loud? He was also very close to the Liberal Party. And I thought there might have been a way into the Liberal Party with this idea to give them a platform on immigration. However, that's when I really got an idea of how the politics behind the politics actually works. And I'm afraid there are just certain parts of a politician I'm not prepared to bow down to or suck to be involved with. So the idea has never really come out. I did talk about it a lot when I was driving limos to important people that were sitting in the back if we had a long drive. And I had some very interesting, very constructive conversations with, industry like bigwigs from mining, from geophysics, from all sorts of different areas, and ran the idea past them. And by the time I'd finished talking and they'd finished listening and considering it, I don't know how many times I got told that they'd vote for me if I was putting that up as a proposition to get elected on. I'm not looking to get elected. I am looking to get a great result for this country. I'm looking at how do we build our nation, because our nation has lost its ability to manufacture. It's lost its ability to sustain itself almost. And we, the average Aussie, are about to lose our own culture. I don't want that to happen. And I know that there are many of these cultures want to move to Australia is because we have such a great Aussie, larrikin kind of culture, something that is a lot of fun, something that you can do with your kangaroos. And if it's not your kangaroos, then it's old pirates.
And what a clustered fuck this is.
Speaking of old pirates, before I go, we have had a bit of interest in going on a cruise. Carl@vofhq.com. I need your name and how many people, if it's you and your significant other or just you, if you are interested in doing a 4-day cruise out of Brisbane up to Airlie Beach or up to Cairns, one of the two. There are 2 different cruises. We're looking in May and June. These 4-day cruises, I guess it's 3 nights. And if you are interested, we would love to get you involved. I have tried ringing Carnival twice now and got hung up on before I've even talked to a human which leads me to believe there may be no humans working at Carnival. They might just be AI and it's having a bad day. However, there is another friend of mine I can reach out to who's a travel agent, and they've done similar things like this before in the radio game, where they'll invite a breakfast announcer to host a trip to Europe, and they'll try and sell 450 people onto that trip, and the radio brekkie duo get to go for nothing. I'm not trying to organise that kind of a deal for me, but I am trying to organise somebody who can coordinate all of this together, so that if you want to do this cruise, I can give you one email address, one name, and one contact, and we should be able to get it all coordinated nicely with Carnival, who I would assume talk to the travel agents maybe a bit better. If any of you are travel agents and you can do this, reach out to me and let's see if we can't funnel this through your business. If you're a travel agent, I'd be happy to do that. Let's keep it in the family, so to speak. But some great suggestions have been put forward as to what we might be able to do. Watler, aside from blowing his own horn, seems to be able to blow a harp. And I'm not talking about a seal here. I'm talking about a mouth organ. He is offering some lessons while we are at sea, which could be good because a bad mouth organ can sound like a strangled cat. But I guess if you're up on the poop deck or the forecastle or wherever, a few lessons. There is also, I'm going to tip my mate Tim into this. He's going to shit himself right now. My mate Tim has sent me a couple of videos on his phone of him playing original songs and singing them on his guitar. Two things about my mate Tim that I didn't know. He could play guitar and he could sing. Three things. He can sing and write songs. So I'm starting to think we've got the beginnings of a bit of a band. And I'm thinking if we have a song list prepared before we go, we can do a little bit of practice at home. But once we get onto the boat, I'm sure we can find a room somewhere. The boat is a big boat. They can find an empty space for us where we might be able to practice, hone our skills, so to speak, before putting on something of a show for our family on the last night of the cruise before we get off in the Brisbane port morning of the fourth day. So if that's something you might be interested in doing, I know I would love to do that. So email me, carl@vofhq.com. I will, like I say, try and get a hold of a travel agent. But if one of you is a travel agent or you have a travel agent in the family, please reach out to me tonight. Send an email tonight. Tell me who I should be talking to. Give me a phone number I can ring, and I will be ringing it tomorrow. And we'll see if we can't sort this out. I reckon it'd be great to have the family together for 4 days. Somebody apparently said in the chat the other night, Carl needs a holiday. Do you think I'm going to get a holiday 4 days on a boat with you lot? It's a lovely thought. But, maybe we can all go and stand up the pointy bit and hold our hands out singing, I'm the king of the world. Hang on, didn't the bloke drown at the end of that movie? Might go to show that not all the dickheads on the road, occasionally they're at sea. Love you, folks. See you tomorrow.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?
Let's ride!